The MBA Candidate Podcast is the world's most exciting show about what it's like to go to business school. We cover all the action, from the GMAT to networking, all the way to case interviews and behavioral interviews. Welcome to the MBA Candidate, the podcast that interviews business school students about life. I'm your host, Adam Miller, a first-year MBA student at the University of Virginia, Darden School of Business. Today we'll be speaking with Jazz, a first-year MBA candidate at Wharton. Welcome to the show, Jazz.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
So appreciative of your time. What was your childhood like?
My childhood was I think it's like pretty typical of an average first-generation immigrant or a child of first-generation immigrants. Both my parents came from Uganda. I was born here. And my childhood is pretty much go to school, get really good grades. We did not come here for you to slack off or not work hard. Interestingly, it took probably until I got to college to realize, like, oh, wow, not everyone's parents made them study for the SATs and made them join every single activity. Like, that's something that I almost took for granted. Interestingly, as an adult, looking back and, seeing the people who I surround myself with and seeing people who I've worked with or met at different points in my life, I realized, like, I guess I am kind of unique in that way. You'd think that would be more common, but it's something that always comes up in interviews or comes up when I talk to people, like, wow, you're so driven. And to me, it's something that I never really had a choice because my parents were so driven.
So I know you had a couple of different advertising jobs after you graduated from college. Can you walk us through really quick how you found those opportunities and what those were like?
Yeah, honestly, my advertising background and experience and story, I think to me, it actually makes me really sad because I had to be really scrappy about it. And the reason why I had to be so scrappy about it is because advertising was and still is such a closed off industry. So when I was in college and I started to see that advertising was something that I wanted to pursue, I had a marketing internship at a nonprofit and realized that I really loved marketing. And so, I started reaching out to ad agencies and, checking on what kind of internship programs they had or what kind of offerings they had for college students. I'll never forget this one ad agency. Somehow I got her on the phone. I don't even know how at that time, but somehow I got this ad agency recruiter on the phone. And she said, I read your application. I'm so impressed by you. You seem like such an accomplished student. We'd love to have you intern, but you forgot to check a certain box and I wanted to confirm with you. And I said, oh yeah, what did I miss? I'll make sure I fix it. And she said, you didn't say if you were an employee referral or a client referral. And I said, wait, what do you mean? She's like, did an employee refer you or are you have some connection to one of our clients? You didn't really specify. And I told her I had no connection to either one. And she said, oh, I'm sorry. Well, it must be a mistake. We don't take interns who aren't referred to us. And I literally said, like, how am I ever going to get into this industry if I have to know somebody? I have to be connected to somebody. I had no way to get into advertising from a connection standpoint. So for me, her keeping it real with me in that honest way told me, like, okay, this isn't going to be something that I'm just going to be able to apply online and figure it out and go get a really great internship. I'm going to just have to be really scrappy. So what I started doing on my own is pretty much scouring the Cornell alumni database for the few people I could find in advertising. I think there were, I'm not even exaggerating, I think there were like 21 people who worked in advertising in New York, which is crazy for such a huge school. But I called every single person who would answer me and I literally said, I'm a student. I know nothing about advertising. Tell me where to start, who to talk to. And they told me which books to read. They told me which publications to follow. They connected me with certain colleagues of theirs. They literally took me under their wing. I have no idea why. And I started to narrow in on a certain function that I liked. I realized that account management was great because it allows you to work on production and media and creative and strategy and be the line into the client. So I started realizing that was an area I liked. I started focusing on New York City specifically because there's the most amount of agencies and most amount of client deal flow happening. And they really honestly just gave me the playbook in a way that I don't even think I really understood at the time how important that was because there was literally going to be no other way for me to enter the industry.
I know you most recently were at MTV. How did you end up at that job?
After I did 3 years in advertising, Birchbox, it still is a beauty and grooming startup, reached out to me and they wanted me to work on campaign strategy for Birchbox Man. And they specifically were looking for someone who had experience with male consumer brands in the grooming space. And they were having a really hard time finding someone who had that expertise, but also someone who had really strong client management skills, which, of course, on the agency side, you get a whole lot of. So I was almost like the perfect candidate in their minds. And so after the agency side, I went to Birchbox for a year. And what I really realized about that role is that when I think about what I want to do long term, I really miss the creativity. On the agency side, you live and breathe creativity and ideation and innovation all day long. And going into in-house marketing, you spend so much time on supply chain and packaging and pricing, all these things that are super important. But I just realized like, wow, I don't really want to do this forever or really at all. So MTV, Viacom specifically, HR reached out to me to work in integrated marketing. And I think the first thing they came to me for was like Nickelodeon. And I was like, I have no interest in doing that. I'll stay at Birchbox forever before I go work on, I have no expertise or interest in working on kids programming. But a little while later, they reached out and said there was an opening for MTV specifically. And so that one was just like an inbound request, just like Birchbox, just like my first agency job. I feel like after a while, I got really good at making my LinkedIn enticing enough to recruiters that I just was constantly getting outreach, and I got to be selective about the places I chose to pursue.
What was the catalyst then for you starting your applications to business school?
You start to think about what the growth trajectory looks like on your current path. So I was a manager, and then I got promoted to senior manager. And I just started to think like, I don't really want to be like a leader in marketing. That's not really something that I think is that exciting to me. Like I reached the point after 7 years or 6 years of doing this that I realized I don't want to keep answering to clients anymore, to be honest, or like external clients, let's say. And I just started to realize no matter how high I get in this world, that's going to be what I'm doing. And I don't really want to do that. And it doesn't really drive me anymore. It started to just feel like, what is the point of all this, if that makes sense? I actually think looking back on it, one really critical moment for me that I didn't realize was that critical at the time, I actually got really badly injured on a client shoot. It was for Frappuccino, and it was just, it's a long, annoying story. But essentially, I got cut with glass on my left ring finger. And I remember I was in the hospital and I had to get surgery and physical therapy and all of this craziness. And I just remember thinking, I got injured to get a bottle into the right shot. Like, what is the point of that? Like, who, in the grand scheme of things, why is that my job? Why is that what I'm doing? Like, what is the point of doing something like that? And so I remember that whole summer while I was working on that program, we went to all these different cities, went to San Francisco and Austin. And when we were in San Francisco, I visited Stanford. And that was my first time ever, like, even being on Stanford's campus. And I was like, wow, business school. Okay, what if I start thinking about this as my way to explore and try something new and get out of the rut that I'm in? And I think being on that campus physically, which probably my first time being on any campus in how many years, 7 years, I just said, like, I have to at least see what this could be. And I'll never forget, I reached out to one of my friends who has an MBA, and he's like, you're exactly who business school needs. Are you kidding? He's like, you're so smart. You're so driven. You're coming from this industry that desperately, honestly, doesn't know what it's doing. You want to move out of marketing, which is like more of like a run-of-the-mill function, into something that's going to transform industry. Like, you have to do this. Now's the time. And I feel like talking to him and having someone say, you're not crazy, you have a right to go after something like this, it really gave me the permission to say, like, okay, full steam ahead, I'm going to do this.
How did you figure out which schools to apply to?
These worlds that I was in, MBAs, it's not even a consideration. It's not like, when are you getting an MBA? Or some people have it, some people don't. It was just, no one really had it. You know, I wasn't at Deloitte with a class of people who are all applying at the same time and it's expected. I did a lot of culling through schools that didn't make sense for my goals or what I wanted to do. But also on the other end, there were schools that I ended up applying to, Columbia and NYU specifically. I wanted for every reason to eliminate those schools. I was like, I don't want to be in New York City. I want to get out of here. I've been in New York my whole life. I really wanted to parachute out of New York as soon as possible. And so to me, it made no sense to apply to New York City schools. I remember going and visiting both schools and I was like, wow, they're both hitting everything in terms of diversity, in terms of feeling super welcome. The students at both those schools literally became like my big brothers and sisters in this process. And I just remember thinking, I'm really going to eliminate a school where I could picture myself in this seat, a school where the administration, students, alumni, everyone is part of a community that I feel like are my people. Like, I can't, it got to the point where I just felt like I wasn't being true to myself if I eliminated schools like that. So think beyond what you think is right or wrong on the surface, because I might have thought those schools weren't right for me because they're in New York, but those schools kill in media and entertainment. They have such great placement rates. They have amazing community. They're in a huge city. Like, there were a lot of things that I would have missed out on if I didn't think about it through that lens. And then Wharton, honestly, Wharton came into the mix very early as well. Media and entertainment, why would you go to Wharton? It's good for like traditional consulting, entrepreneurship, those kinds of roles. But again, after talking to students and visiting, I have to say Wharton, one of the things that really stood out to me, it was one of the only schools where I felt like the entire community embraced me. So even some of the other schools that I was accepted into and didn't choose to go, I felt like the African students had my back, the people of color had my back, the women had my back. But I don't know if I necessarily would have connected with internationals or connected with, white men or whoever. At Wharton, the level of support I got from just allies in the community, like white men who came from banking or came from consulting, who were like, I want to help you because I think your long-term goal is so dope and we need more representation in media. And I might not come from media, I might not be able to help you, but I'll read your essays, I'll help you interview prep. And I feel like that made all the difference to me, that I really felt like if I went to Wharton, I would have the support of every single person behind me. I just felt like I was a part of the school before I even got in. And I remember when I first got my interview invite, I remember for every other school, I'd say like, hey, I got into UCLA. Thanks for helping me. Do you have any tips, etc. I had a few people at each school. At Wharton, I remember when I was sending that note out, I sent it out to like 40 people. And I literally had legitimately 40 people who were invested in getting me in and helping me. And that meant so much to me because by the time I got in and by the time I was making my decisions, I just remember thinking, I can't imagine myself anywhere else. There's no other school that's invested this level of time and effort and just embraced me in a way that was not just taking me as I am. I feel like they pushed me. There were times in my essays where I just didn't want to go certain places, and there were people who said, Jazz, honestly, when you talk to me and you tell me your story, you have to bring that across. Like you're hiding things, you're holding back, you're not being vulnerable. And I feel like I wanted classmates who were going to embrace me, but also push me and hold me accountable.
Congratulations on getting into business school, Jazz. Before I ask you about what you're doing this summer, I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Relish.
Hi, I'm Zach.
Are we recording?
Yeah, Sarah, we're doing the ad right now.
Oh, hey, I'm Sarah.
And we are the co-founders here at Relish Careers.
We were once incoming MBAs, and we created Relish Careers because we wanted a way for MBAs and employers to connect online. So join relishcareers.com today to learn about the companies that want to hire you.
And to view our exclusive employer webinars this summer to prepare for school.
Back to our interview with Jazz and what she's doing the summer before business school starts.
Yeah, I'm doing quite a bit this summer. So I'm leaving my current job in early June. And on the fun social front, I'm doing a lot of traveling. I'm going to Turks and Caicos. I'm going to Spain, Portugal. I might go to a brand camp or two. And then I also have a pre-MBA internship. So this summer, I'll be doing like a remote consulting project with Color Farm Media. It's like the dream company I'd like to be a part of one day. They're focused on increasing diverse representation in media and basically changing the way that they're financing projects and moving away from the existing traditional model to try to incorporate blockchain in new ways. So there's a lot of fun things I can't talk about yet, but either way, I'm very excited about it. Erica Alexander, who people might know from back in the day, she was in Living Single, she was on Cosby's Show, but more recently she was in Get Out, Queen Sugar, and she's focused a lot more right now on writing and being more of like a creative force instead of just being a performer actor. And she's really rounded out her career in a really interesting way. And she and her business partner, Ben Arnon, have really just taken me under their wing and just said, you're super smart, you're really passionate about this, and you're about to go to an amazing business school and come out with skills that are just going to make you unstoppable. And we just want anything you can help us with. I'm going to be helping them out this summer on the content strategy side of things and get a little bit closer to what I'm hoping to do post-business school.
It's becoming really common, it seems like, for people to do pre-MBA internships. I'm actually going to be doing one myself this summer. If you could think back, though, to when you were doing your applications for business school, what additional advice did you receive or advice now when you think back to that time that you'd like to share with our listeners?
It's interesting because I self-doubted the entire way. Like, I spent 90% of my MBA journey like in the shower crying. So I don't feel like I had a handle on everything. But the one thing I will say is one of the best pieces of advice I got was just to remember that you deserve this. If you think of business school as a dinner party, this was the analogy he gave me. You literally belong there. This whole process is basically you letting them know that you deserve a seat at that table. Starting from a place of knowing that you deserve it makes it a lot more palatable. Because to me, I started to think, well, no one with my background goes to business school. Or once I started to say, no, I do deserve this. This is something that I want. This is something that I'm going to put in the work to do. You give yourself permission to go after it in a more realistic way. And I saw so many people along the way just give up and say, this is too hard. This is a lot of work. I feel like I'm never going to make it there. And those things are so understandable because all the way along, there were points where I said, this is too much. I don't want to do this anymore. If I take the GMAT one more time, I don't know if I can make this. And the people I know who gave up, they weren't any less capable. They weren't any less deserving by any means. It was just they let the doubt overtake them. So I think that doubt is healthy. It'll keep you hungry and it'll keep you pushing. But I would say the biggest piece of advice I would tell people is just to realize that you deserve it and you've earned it. And all you're really doing is showing the schools why you belong and why you deserve that seat.
Wow. Great advice. You're on a roll. What else you got for us?
You just have to remember to run your own race because no one's going to pay that $250,000 bill for you at the end. No one's going to go through the 2 years. And so if you start getting caught up in what other people think or, oh, this person's applying round 2, maybe they'll be better prepared because they waited longer and then they had more time. You just have to remember you're the one going through this journey and you have to stay true to what you want to get out of it and your pace and your timing and your gut instinct on things. I feel like I hit a certain point where I said, I actually don't care what anyone else has to say because I've done so much research. I've talked to so many students. I know where I belong and I know that the steps I'm taking to get there are the best steps for me. And whatever happens, I'll know that I gave it my very best shot.
What about Jazz in 20 years, in 30 years? Where do you see yourself? What are some of your dreams? Let's get into that a little bit more. It's not totally clear to me where you see yourself going.
I want to have established my own media and entertainment platform. I want to be working on something that I'm super passionate about. I want to be driving diversity through my own projects instead of being tethered to networks and studios. And I want to be working with writers. I want to be working with directors. I want to be working with people who hopefully by that point will have more opportunities. But coming to me and coming to my company, I want to be able to greenlight, fund, and promote projects that I believe in that really, truly reflect America and the world. I feel like I'm so sick and tired of seeing movie trailers and slates that I just feel like are this imaginary world that no longer exists where everyone looks the same and it's all about this one specific narrative. I just feel like we're just too evolved for that at this point. And so in 30 years, I want to be a leader in that charge. I almost want to be seen as a best-in-class example of doing that at scale.
Who do you look up to right now that you think is doing a really good job, if anyone, in the entertainment industry?
Oh, I feel like on a person-by-person basis, I would say Will Packer's doing an amazing job. So he runs a production company that's very focused on diversity. And I mean, he just launched his film with Gabrielle Union, Breaking In. He's doing an amazing job. I think on the creative side, Issa Rae as a writer is doing an amazing job. Ava as a director is doing an amazing job. I think even just on the company side, I think what Pharrell's doing with I Am Other and Issa Rae is amazing. Even Shonda Rhimes with Shondaland, and now moving to Netflix, we'll see how amazing that gets. There's a lot of people who are doing it, I think, in their own lane. So I think people are doing it in directing or in writing, or people are doing it with specific shows or on the music front. My ideal goal in the long term is that we'll one day be able to get the scale of a Sony or the scale of a Paramount to do that for all facets of entertainment. I don't want to just create a company that creates Black shows or creates shows for people of color. I want to be able to create video games and esports and graphic novels. I want to be part of something so much bigger than just the sum of all these different parts.
How will you know when you've achieved your goal? Is there something that will happen that you wake up one day and you know that you've fulfilled that mission?
That's such a good question. Honestly, this seems really, really out there, but even in this past year with Black Panther, last year with Moonlight, my goal, I feel like when I feel like I can rest and say like I have changed this industry is in 30 plus years, if Black Panther and Moonlight are just a normal occurrence. It's not something that happens every few years or for me, twice in my whole lifetime. I want to be at a point where those kinds of films are the norm, because those stories are incredible stories that people have been pitching for over 100 years since film has existed. And they couldn't get in the door. They couldn't get funding. They may have pitched a story and they said, that's perfect. Let's just put a white character in it or put a man in it. And I feel like I would know that I did my job if those stories weren't these unicorns. If Scandal having a Black female lead wasn't a unicorn. I want to get to the point where we don't have the first female to win this or the first Black person to get a credit for a comedy writing. I want to get to the point where those stories are the norm, because honestly, that's where demographics are going. That's where America already is. And that's what globalization and the way the world is going in terms of our interconnectivity is going. And so until we get to that point, I feel like I won't feel like I've accomplished what I should have.
What do you think is going to derail you? What personally or systemically might stop you from getting there?
Honestly, a huge issue, and something that I think about a lot, is getting comfortable with the existing system. So it could very well happen. I mean, this would be champagne problems, but I graduate from Wharton, some major studio hires me, and they're like, we just want you to do this on the inside. Like, you have such amazing experience. We want you to do this here. I feel like one thing that could very easily happen is that I just never go out and do it on my own. And there's a lot you can do on the inside. And I don't discount that at all. I feel like there's a lot you can do at a major studio or at a major network. But I feel like at some point, one thing that I'm really passionate about is ownership. I feel like that's a huge part of the problem right now, is that people of color just don't have ownership over their IP, their stories, talent agencies, all of the systems that keep the entertainment industry alive. And I feel like if I'm part of that system forever, it's going to be really hard to change it, because I'm hopefully going to be making really great money and getting a lot of great accolades on that side. And the people who I've seen who've made the biggest impact are the people who are willing to go out and do it on their own. And so I just want to make sure that I don't get seduced by the stability and the comfortability of being on the inside.
Well, I can certainly keep you accountable if I continue to have you on the show. Would it be all right if I follow up with you and see where you end up doing your summer internship next year?
Sure, definitely follow up with me.
Well, we've talked a lot about how you got to this stage in your life, what you're doing right now to set yourself up for the future. Is there anything else, any other pieces of wisdom or things you want to just share with other people who are headed off to business school that you feel might be valuable for them to know?
One thing that someone told me about this process very early on, and I didn't believe her. She told me that this process, the reason why, podcasts like yours exist and there's so much literature written about this, is because the business school process is so uniquely difficult. I have friends who applied to every single kind of grad school you can imagine, and it's very hard. I'm not discounting anything else they're doing. I would never want to be in an MCAT room or LSAT room. I know all of those are very, very hard in their own ways. But one of the things that makes business school uniquely hard is that they really force you to introspect and dig deep in a way that I don't think I fully understood. To me, I was like, I'm going to go take accounting and go take corp fin. Why do I have to spill my guts out to you? Why is that important? And this one person who gave me this advice early on, she's at Berkeley, actually. She's an amazing second year. I remember she told me, if you're writing your essays and you're not crying, you're doing it wrong. And I just remember thinking, like, why? What does that have to do with anything? I just want to go get a great job and make a dent in this universe. Like, why do I have to do all this? And I understand now why she said that. Even if, you don't have to make all your essays sob stories by any means. You don't have to get into crazy traumas of your life. That's not even what I'm saying necessarily. But if you don't feel confused, if you don't feel scared, if you don't feel uncomfortable, you really aren't doing it right. And I remember there was a point where all my essays, I just kept them so surface and this is what I want to do. And I didn't want to touch on diversity because I just thought that was scary. And I just thought if some white admissions officer in Philly or New York or LA or whatever school I'm applying to is just going to think I'm this radical person, and I should just say I want to go be a brand manager or work in branding at an entertainment agency and whatever, just something safe. I just started to read my essays and just say, like, who is this person? Like, this isn't even me. Once I started getting into the diversity side of it and thinking about just my childhood growing up and how much I got from watching shows like Fresh Prince or shows like Family Matters, coming from a suburb where I was the only one who looked like me. And I realized, like, that is important. That's not something that I can just pretend isn't a driving force for me. I would just say for anyone going through this process, those are what's going to get you to the end goal. I have so many friends who along the way in this process went through that same pain with me. And they said, oh, I don't want to talk about this family member's health crisis and why that's driving me towards healthcare management. And I would say, but you have to, because that's such a core part of what's driving you and what's going to one day make you an empathetic leader and help you drive change in this sector. So I would say for anyone, whatever your goals are, even if you don't know what your goals are, even if you're confused, lean into that confusion and lean into being scared and being terrified and feeling uncomfortable and vulnerable. It's not fun. I'm not going to say it's fun, but I don't know many people who did that surface level thing who are happy with where they're going, to be fully honest. So as hard as it is, do that work, because when you get into business school, your learning teams are going to push you to do that. Your classmates are going to push you. Your professors are going to push you to do that. This isn't just take classes and leave. This is a very immersive process, and you have to bring your whole self to it. And the reason why they ask you those essays about really deep questions is because they want to prime you to do that for, honestly, the rest of your life.
When I was writing my essays, I also did a similar thing where they were really personal, and I didn't share them with anyone because I was terrified of what their reactions were going to be and what they might learn about me. How did you get over that fear of sharing those things that made you cry?
You bring up a really good point. I don't think, if something's super personal to you, I actually don't think you should be sharing it with 19 people. Like, that's how you know you have a good essay. Like, to me, I didn't read your essays in particular, but I'd imagine you were getting really vulnerable about certain things that motivated you or impacted you. I think you have to calibrate based on how comfortable you are. No one's forcing you to show it to a ton of people. And I actually think I'm glad that for certain essays, outside of the admissions officer and maybe one other person, no one else will ever even know what I wrote about. You just have to, I would say, make that choice for yourself. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying this essay is super personal. There's nothing for anyone to review because I'm just laying it all out there. This is my little manifesto, versus other essays that are a little bit more, I would say, straight to the point.
Well, we're going to end on sort of a fun note here and do some rapid fire questions with you.
Cool.
Who's your personal hero?
I've never met her. I have no connection to her whatsoever, but I would have to say Issa Rae. And I think that's just because when I was in college, a huge part of the reason why I think I'm even in entertainment. At the time, all the shows were Gossip Girl and 90210, these little white high school shows that I loved. I love those shows. But she came out with Awkward Black Girl, and I feel like she gave me permission to say, my story deserves to be told. And no one can tell me that my story is less than or not mainstream enough. She democratized entertainment for me, and I think she set me on the path that I'm on. How
did you react when you found out that you got into Wharton? What'd you do that day?
I remember distinctly Frank Delvecchis, the director of admissions, called me at 9:57 a.m. I was one of the last people, and I was convinced I didn't get in. And I was in my bathroom, and I'll never forget, I just broke down crying. He was talking to me, and I just blacked out, and I was just on my floor. And he was like, it's okay, you can let it out. And I let it out. It was something that I'd thought about for a year and change at that point, but you just can never prepare for when it actually hits you.
What do you think the chances are you get sucked into working at Goldman Sachs or McKinsey?
I could never. There's nothing even wrong with it, but I can't wear a suit. I can't stop myself from cursing. There's just certain things that are just part of who I am authentically, and I already have to change who I am for the jobs I've had. I can't imagine changing even more than I already do.
What's the strangest gift you've ever received?
Well, one of my ex-boyfriends, he gave me an iPhone charger for Christmas, and it was not wrapped, no card, and we didn't last much longer after that.
But your phone's been doing great since then, I hope.
Yeah. I think I still have that same charger, but yeah.
That is a terrible gift. What is the thing you are most looking forward to in business school?
Just one?
You can list a couple if you'd like.
Honestly, one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to, being in charge of my own life. And that sounds so weird, but when you're in this grind, especially in New York City, my life is not my own. My existence is asking for PTO days. And even working at MTV, every summer, the VMAs takes over my whole summer. I haven't had a vacation in the summer in 4 years. There's just certain things that I can't control about my own life. Even when I wake up in the morning and, how I want to spend my days and what projects I want to work on. That's honestly, that's a part of life and that's part of working. But in business school, outside of the core, I get to choose who I hang out with. I get to choose what clubs I'm part of. I can leave on a Friday and go anywhere I want. I can ball out. I can live on a student budget. I can do anything I want. Janelle Monáe, one of her new songs, she says young, wild, black and free or whatever. I literally just want to be young, wild, black and free. And I feel I've never been able to do that. Not in college, not in high school. My whole life has just been so structured. I feel for the first time in my life, I deserve to do whatever I want. I'm excited to, this sounds sad, but finally get to be myself. I want to get braids. I want to stop straightening my hair. I want to start dressing how I want to dress. I want to just start being my authentic true self that I haven't been able to be.
Well, I'm really excited for you. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the podcast today. When I came up with this idea last week to start this podcast, you were the first person that I thought of that I wanted to have on the show. So this may very well be the first episode.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I feel like that's the power of having people who are like-minded and trying to do better in their lives, no matter where their paths are taking them, is that you get to meet people that I don't know any world where I would have met you otherwise.
Jazz and I met last month during the after party of an MBA networking event in Cincinnati. A small group of us ordered champagne and pizza to a hotel room after the program, and we took turns sharing pivotal moments in our lives. Jazz's story inspired me, and I loved the advice that she was giving to the rest of us. So I hope that the energy and openness of this episode will set the tone for the show. On the next episode of the MBA Candidate Podcast, we'll hear from Nick, a native of Chicago who's moving across town to attend the Booth School of Business. He has a passion for renewable energy, and we talk about how entry into a group called Management Leadership for Tomorrow pushed him to apply to business school. I'm Adam Miller, and this is the MBA Candidate Podcast.